Before we start working with conditional access, MFA, or any of the identity security features in this course, we first need to build the environment where everything will live. In Microsoft, that environment is called a tenant. You can think of a tenant as your company's cloud space. It is where your users are created, where your sign-in happen, and where your security policies are configured. So before we can test access control, enable MFA, or simulate identity attacks, we need to make sure the tenant exists first. That is why this lab is important. We are not jumping to security controls yet. We are first building the foundation that all of the upcoming labs will depend on. Now let's understand why we actually need a tenant. Think of a tenant as your company space in the cloud. It's like your own environment where everything is isolated and managed. Inside this tenant, we will create our users. This is where all sign-ins will happen. And this is where we will apply all of our security controls. So when we talk about conditional access, MFA, or identity protection later in this course, all of those policies are configured inside this tenant. Without a tenant, there is nowhere to apply those controls, which means we would not be able to test or simulate any real-world scenarios. That's why this step is critical. We are building the foundation first before moving into security. When we create a tenant, Microsoft automatically assigns us a default domain that ends with onmicrosoft.com. This domain is very important because it becomes the identity foundation of your environment. Every user will use this domain. For example, something like user@yourtenant.onmicrosoft.com. So whenever someone signs in or whenever policy is applied, it is all tied back to this domain. You can later add custom domains like your company domains. But for our labs, we will be using this default onmicrosoft.com domain. Also, one important thing to remember, this initial domain name cannot be changed later. So when you create it, make sure you choose something meaningful and reusable across your labs. This domain is going to stay with you throughout the entire course. Now let's clarify something that often confuses a lot of people: the difference between a tenant and a license. A tenant is your environment. It's the space where everything lives, such as your users, your sign-ins, and your configurations. A license like Microsoft 365 E5 is something you apply inside that environment to unlock specific features. So think of it like this: the tenant is the house, and the license is what gives you access to the rooms inside that house. Now here is the key point. You cannot get E5 trial without a tenant. The tenant must exist first, and then you assign the E5 license on top of it. That's why in this course, we first create the tenant, and in the next lab, we enable Microsoft 365 E5. So now that we understand what a tenant is and why it needs to come before licensing, in this lab, we are going to focus on creating that tenant from scratch. We will choose our onmicrosoft.com domain, set up our admin account, and make sure everything is ready to use. Then in the next lab, we will come back and enable the Microsoft 365 E5 trial, so we can unlock all the advanced identity and security features. So for now, think of this step as building the foundation. Everything else in the course will build on top of this. Let's go ahead and create our tenant. Now let's go ahead and start creating our environment. Instead of directly typing a link, I'm going to do this the same way most people would do it. I'll open a Google and search for Azure trial. From the results, I'm going to click on the first official Microsoft link that makes me to the Azure account creation page. Once the page loads, you should see this screen, Build in the Cloud with Azure account. Just take a second here to make sure you are on the official Microsoft site. Now on this page, you will see an option that says Try Azure for free. This is the option we need. So go ahead and click on Try Azure for free. This will start the process of creating your Azure account, which will eventually lead us to creating our tenant. And remember, this is an important step. because this is how we begin building the foundation for all our labs we will be doing later in this course. Now we are at the point where Microsoft asks us to enter an email address to begin the sign up process. At this stage, I recommend using a personal email address rather than a work account. This reason is simple. This is a lab environment. We will be testing policies, changing settings, and working through security scenarios that you would not want connected to your production or company environment. Using a personal email keeps this setup separate, cleaner, and much easier to manage. It also reduces the chance of running into organizations' restrictions, existing tenant conflicts, or sign-in issues tied to corporate policies. So here I'll go ahead and enter my personal Outlook email and continue. Click Next. Now we are on the profile information page where we need to complete a few basic details to continue with the Azure account setup. On the right hand side, you will see that Microsoft is asking how you plan to use this account. Make sure you select for personal use. This is important because we are creating a lab environment, not connecting this to a company or organization. Next, we have a country or region. This should match your actual location because Microsoft uses this for billing verification and compliance. In my case, I'll leave it as Canada. Then we move to the name fields. Here, you can use your real name or lab-friendly name. For consistency across all labs, I'm using something simple like SOC Labs. Now, notice that the email address is already populated from the previous step. Below that, we need to enter a phone number. This is used for verification purposes only. Microsoft may send a code to confirm that the account is legitimate. I'll enter my phone number here. Once you enter the phone number, you will complete the verification process and you will see a confirmation like this showing that verification is complete. At this point, just take a moment to review all the details. Once everything looks good, we can move forward to the next step. Once done, click on Next. Now we are on the next step where Microsoft asks for your address information. This is part of the account verification process and it's mainly used for billing validation, even though we are using a free trial. So here, go ahead and enter your address details. Now below, you will see a few checkbox options. The most important one is the first checkbox. This is where you agree to Microsoft terms and conditions. Make sure you check this one. The other options are related to promotional emails and sharing information with partners. These are optional. You can leave them unchecked if you prefer. Once everything looks correct, we will move to the next step. Before we continue, let's quickly understand what you actually get with this Azure free account. On the left-hand side, Microsoft shows a few key benefits. First, you get $200 in credit that you can use within the first 30 days. This allows you to explore and test different Azure services without paying upfront. Next, you can get access to free services for 12 months, including commonly used resources. You will also notice that some services are always free, which means you can continue using them even after the trial period ends. And one more important point here, Microsoft includes spending protection, which means your credit card will not be automatically charged unless you explicitly upgrade to a paid subscription. So overall, this gives you a safe environment to learn, test, and build without worrying about unexpected costs. For our course, we will mainly use this account to create our identity environment and run our labs. Now we are on the final step of the Azure account setup, where Microsoft asks for payment details. This is actually the point where many people feel a bit uncomfortable. So let me clarify exactly what's happening here. Even though this is a free trial, Microsoft requires a credit card for identity verification and abuse prevention. This is not an automatic charge. As we saw earlier, Azure includes spending protection, which means you will not be billed unless you explicitly upgrade to a paid plan. So this step is simply to confirm that you are a real user and to prevent misuse of free resources. Now go ahead and enter your cardholder name followed by your credit card number, expiry date, and CVV. Make sure that the billing address matches the address you entered in the previous step. This helps avoid verification issues. Once all the details are filled in, take a moment to review everything carefully. Again, just to reinforce, you're not being charged here unless you manually upgrade later. When you are ready, click on Sign Up to complete the process. Now we are seeing a screen that says Protect Your Account. This is where Microsoft is asking us to enable multi-factor authentication, also known as MFA. MFA is one of the most important security controls in identity protection. It adds an extra layer of verification on top of your password. For example, a mobile app approval or one-time code. Microsoft even highlights here that MFA can block more than 99% of identity-based attacks. So even though this is just a lab environment, this is actually a very good practice to enable. We will be working with MFA in much more details later in this course. But for now, we will go ahead and click on Continue with this setup. So click on Next and follow the prompts to complete the MFA configuration. Enter your password. Click Next. You can add here alternate email address or a phone number. I'll go ahead and choose phone number and enter my phone number here. Once done, click on Next. Let's solve the puzzle. Click Submit. So let's enter the code I have received on my phone number and click Next. Here Microsoft is just showing a general account information screen, nothing to configure. So go ahead and click OK to continue. Here Microsoft requires adding a recovery email for account security. Go ahead and add a secondary email to continue. I'll add a recovery email here and click on Next. Let's enter the security code I received in my email and click on Next. As you can see that our recovery methods are now saved. Click on Done. Now that we have completed the sign up process, we can verify that our Azure account has been successfully created. At the moment, we are on the Microsoft account page, but this is not where we manage our cloud environment. To access our actual lab environment, we need to go to the Azure portal. So I will open a new tab and navigate to portalazure.com. Once the page loads, you may see a welcome screen like this. This confirms that our Azure account and more importantly our tenant has been successfully created. From here, this is where we will manage users, configure identity, and build all of our labs throughout this course. So go ahead and click on Continue and start working inside the Azure portal. Now we are inside the Azure portal, which means our account and tenant have been successfully created. You might notice a message here saying you don't have a permission to view credits. Don't worry about this, this is completely normal. At this stage, we haven't fully activated or assigned all subscriptions yet, so Azure is simply informing us that we do not have access to billing or credit details. This does not impact anything we are going to do in this course. We are here for the security labs, not for deploying paid Azure resources. So you can safely ignore this message. From here, we will start navigating into Microsoft Entra ID, where we will begin working with users' authentication and conditional access. At the moment, we are signed in using a personal Microsoft account, which is m365socklabs@outlook.com, which we use to set up this environment. However, for working with Microsoft Cloud Services, we typically use organizational users inside a tenant. So from here, the next step is to move into our directory and start setting up users that we will use across our labs. These users will allow us to simulate real-world scenarios, test configurations, and manage different roles within the environment. We will be using this same setup not just for one service, but across multiple Microsoft workloads. So it's important to keep the structure clean and reusable. From here, we will navigate into the directory and begin creating our lab users. Now that our environment is ready, let's move into the directory where we will start creating our lab users. I'll open up a new tab and go to entra.microsoft.com. This takes us into the Microsoft Entra Admin Center, which is where we manage users, identities, and access across the environments. From here, on the left-hand side, go ahead and click on Users. This is where all accounts in our environments are managed. Right now, we only have our initial account, but we will be creating additional users for our labs. At the top, click on New Users and then select Create New User. This allows us to create an internal user inside our environment. Now we are on the user creation page. Here, we need to define the identity of our admin account. Start with the user principal name. I'll use something like admin at m365soglabs.outlook.onmicrosoft.com. This will be our main administrative account for the lab environment. I'll give a display name, lab admin. And for the password, we can either define one manually or use the auto-generated option. For the lab purposes, we will manually enter password. So I'll go ahead and uncheck auto-generate password and enter our password. Make sure that the account is enabled, which is by default. Once done, let's go to the Assignment tab to assign this user an admin role. From here, click on Add Role. This is where we can assign administrative permission to this account. In the search box, type Global Admin and we will select Global Administrator. This role provides full access across the environment, allowing us to manage all Microsoft services. Click on Select to assign the role. Now this user will be created with administrative privileges. For lab purposes, we are assigning this role so we can use this account to configure and manage everything moving forward. Now we can proceed to review plus create and then click on create. As you can see that our lab admin has successfully created. Let's click on refresh. Now we have a dedicated account that we can use across all our labs moving forward.